Hey guys, ShinoDBD here. As some of you guys may or may not know, the developers of Dead by Daylight did an AMA on Reddit the other day, where basically they were just kind of taking questions, both interesting ones and not so interesting ones, from people in the community who decided to post on Reddit. After seeing the post, I pulled out some of the questions that I felt like were most interesting and wanted to let you guys know about them, as well as give my thoughts on some of the things the developers said during the AMA. This isn't something I'll do regularly, but I figured this one time it might be interesting, so I figured why not. And it's a good excuse for a video and a good excuse to let you guys know what else is going on in the community in the off chance you don't frequent Reddit or anything like that. But now that all that's out of the way, let's hop into it. The first question that I picked up from the Reddit AMA is, will the archives add more lore to the character stories? And the devs' answer to this is yes, they will. A big part of the archives is to add lore to the game. We should have more info on the archives once they're a little bit closer. I pulled this one out because although I'm not a huge lore head myself, I know quite a few people both in my stream and just in my community in general are really big about DBD lore. And to be completely honest, I do feel like it is one of the more interesting parts of the game. I've read a lot of the backstories for the killers, and although I'm not sure who comes up with them, they've done a really good job of making them very interesting and very engaging. They've done a good job of incorporating things about the characters that they're trying to pull in, as well as, a little bit of their own storytelling, but I think they've done a really good job with it. So for those of you guys who are excited about lore, just know that when the archives come out, you'll be inundated with tons of new stuff in the lore department. So good on you there, and happy for you. Next up was a question, simply put, dedicated servers, which, as they say, is not technically a question, but I know what they're asking. Technically not a question, but I can provide some kind of answer. We're still on track for end of summer 2019, and remember, technically summer ends on September 21st. So, although they didn't give an official date, technically September 21st is the end of summer, and they said they should be on track to have it out before the end of summer. So, although I wouldn't necessarily say for sure, it does look like that it'll probably be coming out with the next chapter, whatever that next chapter might be. The next chapter is not a mid-chapter release, it is a major chapter because the mid-chapter release was the Freddy rework. So more than likely the dedicated servers will be coming out with a new killer, which should make things very interesting in my opinion. Okay, next up we got, are there any plans to change the requirements for the Left 4 Dead achievement since the endgame collapse makes it harder? Keep up the good work. For those of you guys who don't know what the Left Behind achievement is, or Left 4 Dead is, to my understanding, it's basically an achievement where you have to be the last survivor left alive, and you have to finish the generators and escape. I don't think this is impossible to do, but it is very unlikely. And by very unlikely, I mean it's extremely unlikely. To finish a generator when everyone's dies, especially with endgame collapse being a thing, is near impossible. This achievement was designed, I'm assuming, with Bill's Perks Left Behind back when they were trying to make Left Behind useful. But I mean, Left Behind was even ridiculously weaker before the rework. Even now that it's stronger, it's still not nearly strong enough to be able to be viable for this achievement. And the main reason why the achievement's so hard is because if the killer finds a hatch while you're working on the last generator, you'll be kicked off the generator and the doors will just open on their own. And then of course, you've got, the generator done, but as you know, because of how terrible the endgame collapse is, the killer pretty much just watches both doors. So even in a situation where you were, unless you were able to finish the gen before the killer could close the hatch, so that you have the option of the hatch and the doors, you're probably not getting out. So that makes the achievement extremely hard to pull off. Very few people have it. Most of the people who even had it back in the day kind of, I guess you could say, cheesed it or cheesed for it. Or I guess you could say not so much cheated, but worked with people in order to obtain it. But I mean, it looks like, as according to them, achievements are difficult to change once they go live due to a process of external parties. With that being said, we'll look into what we can do about that. I'm assuming that they have some issue because the people who unlock the achievement the old way and all sorts of other things, and it can cause a whole lot of hiccups with Steam. That being said though, something does need to be done because that achievement went from being extremely hard to pull off to basically impossible now with the endgame collapse. and the fact that like a killer can stop you from doing the achievement even if you're about to finish it. So it's really kind of in a bad spot right now, and if it's not going to be fixed, the achievement itself should either be retired or something else. But at least they're still thinking about these kinds of things. After that, we've got any info on a totem counter or some sort that would be displayed on screen. It would really benefit some people in solo queue or people who solo queue. Their response: hey, we've thought about this, and we have thought about this and has been brought up a few times. We're unsure whether or not we will put a totem counter in game or whether a perk like small game might get a counter at this moment. Ultimately, we're looking for the best way to bridge the knowledge between solos and survivor friends. This kind of goes into something that they'll go on a little bit later into the Q&A, but essentially something the devs have hit on a lot is that in order to balance the game around survivor friends, solos have to be close to being able to compete with survivor friends, which right now, playing solo queue and playing survivor friends are two entirely different games, even if the players aren't with comms. Just the amount of information to exchange and how people play is entirely different, and until solo is brought to that level to where they're competent to be able to play at that like consistently, balancing around survivor friends would make the game unplayable for solo players, which is something I've echoed and multiple people from my community have echoed before, so there's no real surprise there. That being said, it does seem like something they want to implement, or at least thinking of some way to implement, as they said, to try to bridge the gap between solo and survivor friends. And personally, I think more information the better. Like, it's really hard. If nothing else, I feel like there should be some sort of notification, like sound notification, to alert survivors when all the totems have been cleansed on the map. So at the very least, if they can't like say necessarily cleanse like or know how many totems are left, they can at least know when all the totems are gone. Next up, are you planning to add a replay system or somewhere where you can see your own stats? I know you have data as of every now and then you make those pretty graphic infos with it. The replay idea is really cool. We love it as well, but it's not something we can do right now. That makes a lot of sense. I know that Riot had the ability to do it for a long time and other games like League of Legends, but adding a replay system means that something in your game would have to log the data of every moving part of your game along with playing it, which does take up a lot of resources. So I can understand like that not being something, if they don't already have that built, that does take some time to put together. However, the other part of this, they said, is something we'd like to do eventually if possible. And as for stats, I'd love to add a leaderboard of sorts. I think I don't have to tell you guys, but you guys all know about the DBD net leaderboard. You've seen me talk about it on stream. That tracks the number of escape survivors have, the number of kills killers have, and so many other things. I think this leaderboard is great for letting people know where they stand, letting people know what their escape percentages are, things like that. Just like with Call of Duty or anything else, people like having these so they can know their stats, they can see their progression, and more importantly, so they can see their past, see how they've done, see what they've improved on, things like that. I think having something like that is really great in the game, especially for like long-time players, so they can reflect on how they've done. And even for newer players, so they can like watch their own progress and watch their percentage goes up as they get better in the game and see how their percentages change if they've gotten better at the game. If they notice, whether or not once they started making more saves, they started getting out more themselves or things like that. I feel like these things are all really important. They're not something that everybody's going to care about, but I think that there are people who do care about them. And I think having them for the people who care about them is really important. Next. Can we expect a game mode with 2 killers and 8 survivors? While we've received this suggestion multiple times, this is not something we're looking at doing at the moment. It would require a lot of work to balance properly, and we'd rather focus our efforts in the base game rather than splitting our attention on 2 radically different game modes. So, for those of you guys who don't know, their other game, Death Garden, just received a 2v10 mode, which is probably why this is coming up and getting conversation. Since one of their games got it, they're wondering if maybe Dead by Daylight will too. But I think the reason why Death Garden got it is because, one, that game was, to be fair, kind of in a rough spot with a very low player base, and that was probably just something done drastically to shake up the game to see if they could increase the level of fun with it, which, again, don't get me wrong, is a good thing and a smart move. But I think Dead by Daylight will probably need something like a 2v8 soon, but I don't think it necessarily needs it now. I think that they're probably way more focused on balancing the killers and balancing the survivors and making the game just enjoyable to play for both sides in its base form. and setting up a 2v8 mode does require way more like thought process. Like, for example, right now there's 1 killer versus 4 survivors, but realistically the game ends up being more of like a 1v1 while the other 3 survivors have something to do. It's extremely hard, if not impossible, to balance a game where essentially 2 killers could be chasing 1 survivor. In an actual scenario, based on the way the current game works, the survivor wouldn't have a like slow chance. The survivor would legitimately just have no chance. Or like 1 killer could just go from one direction, the other killer could just go from the other direction, and the survivor would be down within seconds. And it would pretty much be a rinse and repeat. Yeah, the other survivors would have free reign to do the other generators, but this would burn a lot of time, and honestly, ending a chase in 10 seconds would probably be extremely strong and way too overpowered for the devs to be able to balance. But I digress. Next question. Do you guys plan to add any rewards for leveling up devotion? There's no plan yet, but this is something we would like to do eventually. I think it's probably a good thing, but at the same time, not really. You guys already know my opinion on devotion. At this point, it's literally just a Skinner box, and it's literally just a mechanic put in the game to psychologically trick you into thinking you're gaining something, but it really means absolutely nothing. You guys want to know my full deep dive in this? If you guys want to know my full thoughts on this, sorry, for the study there. Easiest way would just be to go into like the extra credits episode. I'll leave a link to it below on Skinner boxes, but I think it's a really, in its current form, it's a really low down dirty trick to make you want to keep playing the game or feel as if you're getting progress from playing the game, and doesn't provide anything meaningful to the game as it stands. Now they could add stuff to it to maybe change that, but as it stands, it's literally just a psychological trick, and I'm not a huge fan of those kind of things. That's not the type of way I think you should encourage player engagement. Is No Mither ever going to get a buff, or is ever getting a buff? We aim to improve all perks. I've heard some good suggestions for No Mither. One in particular, remove the injured music while under the effect of No Mither. I know another one is to hide the fact that you have No Mither from the killer. I think that'd be a great buff, by the way. As of the moment, we have not commented on either of these changes, but it will be improved at some point. Basically, the long TLDR there is they're probably looking at a lot of perks, not just No Mither. I would hope that they're looking at a lot of other perks. Left Behind would be one of them that I would also recommend checking out. But they did a giant perk rework, or rebuff if you would, for a while back for survivors. That's when we got like the Calm Spirit buff and the Deja Vu buff and stuff like that. Some of those buffs were enough to bring some of those perks into play, like Urban Evasion and stuff like that, but the other buffs have still kind of left these perks being by the wayside. Obviously, you could see things that were affected by this would be things like, you guys know, Deja Vu got a little bit more play, but not much. Resilience is still kind of good, but still not great and not really worth running. Another one would be like This Is Not Happening. There's a lot of perks I'd still like to see be relooked at, because although they're not terrible, they're still not worth using over just 90% of the other perks in the game. And if you decide to run them, you're pretty much just choosing to handicap yourself or handicap your team, which is kind of a waste considering like all the cool things you could do with perks. But I digress. Let's move on. Next up, how many killers or survivors would you like to see in the game in total? The developers, we want our game to keep going for a while. We know you guys like variety and new gameplay, so we'll provide a lot of interesting characters in the upcoming years. Key word here is years. I don't think that when the developers made this game, they expected it to be go as long as it did, but now that they're in the position they're in, I'm pretty sure they have every intention of keeping this game going on in the same way of, say, League of Legends. I 100% expect probably within the next year, we're probably going to be looking at another engine update, would be my guess, because they've been with this engine for about 2 or 3 years, and I feel like they could probably do a lot of new things if they upgraded it. But that being said, more than likely they're going to be sticking with this for quite some time, and I don't know if everyone on the team is planning on staying forever, but I'm pretty sure the higher ups who are in charge of this don't plan on canceling this anytime soon. So for those of you who are hoping and waiting for Dead by Daylight 2, the closest you'll probably get to that is the engine update that I think is coming in season or year 4. But outside of that, I don't think that they'll be ending Dead by Daylight anytime soon. All right, this next one's gonna be a really good one. Give Bunny Fang with a cute little face. Now the answer, I'm going to be the killjoy here, no for the moment. The reason why we're not doing Bunny Fang is the way the cosmetic is technically set up. Having a full hoodie would require to lock up the head and torso cosmetic together, and we cannot do this for the moment. But I'm not a total killjoy. We're still looking at a way to make it happen. Just don't hold your breath. The follow-up questions, obviously, why not compromise? I've seen concepts and designs from fans who've been able to make it work. I'm curious as to why why it has to be an absolute full hoodie. And in which case, the dev team says, that's something our art team considered, but we decided we want to stay true to the original design and figure out a technical solution to the problem. Even if it takes longer, once we add the feature to answer our technical problem, it will also allow us to do more of this type of cosmetic instead of the workaround for a one-time thing. So ideally, they're probably coming up with new cosmetic sets and maybe even just hard locked-in cosmetic bundles or things like that. Maybe something where like it forces you to wear two items together, or item is only available as an outfit. I know we like our interchangeable parts, but I think they making that interchangeable part of that in particular might look really weird or might just be really hard to encode. Again, I'm not a dev, so I can't really go too much into that, but I do get why they're doing what they're doing. This is a problem they'd probably like to fix for a more long-term thing, as opposed to something they just want to do short-term to get it out the door and get that money. I feel like that may be somewhat done in goodwill, and I'm gonna believe positive intent and that they hope to use this in a positive way for future outfits in the future, as opposed to just like going for the quick cash grab. So I guess we gotta at least give them that, right? Next up, have you ever considered removing perk tiers to reduce the grind? We have considered it. We went another way, but the goal is the same: to ease on the perk grind and promote easier access to more perks. We're releasing these changes in the upcoming chapter update. To give you more information, we're also preparing a blog post to explain the upcoming changes. The blog post should be available in a few weeks. I've seen a couple different designs on this. I mean, if it's what I've seen in mobile or what was leaked with the battle pass and stuff like that, it might be interesting. But all in all, I cannot say that I would be too freaked out or concerned. This is probably something they've been working on for a long time, ever since they announced Legacy. They said that they were going to be working on ways to make the grind less and less. And I feel like they didn't rush to do it because they wanted to focus on players having the grind as their engagement for the game, like leveling up and maxing out characters and putting the new perks and new killers and new survivors. However, now that they've got the devotion system and they have the battle pass system, I feel like that they might feel like that not having all the perks would be too limiting, especially since you'd be a new player playing against someone who has every perk in the game is a huge disadvantage and would kind of deter you from wanting to play the game. So since they have new things, I believe, in the pipeline to help keep you engaged, like I said, with the battle pass and the devotion system, they might be more willing to lean away from having the blood point grind be the grind that keeps you in the game. Whether or not that's the right thing to do, I don't know. But I mean, as we add more and more killers and more survivors, the perks get more and more. Having 3 tiers for every perk and having to go through every tier is a huge pain and does take a huge amount of time. So eventually the feature bloat would get too much if they didn't do something about it. So I'm not surprised that they're looking at it. All right, next question. Which percentage of killer players are survivor players? Is it 50-50, or are there more survivors or more killers? And in which case the dev says this can be depending on a lot of different factors like region, time of day, the release of content. When a new killer comes out, it tends to be more people playing killer, which increases queue time. Meanwhile, in Japan, there always end up being far more people playing survivor than playing killer. Meaning people are probably, and this is not something something I guess I'm not surprised of, is a lot of people probably just like playing friends. I wouldn't say that playing with friends is not a popular thing in in America or North America and other places. But I do know in Japan, a lot of people get together, they go to internet cafes, gaming is a much more acceptable pastime, even for older folks in Japan and in a lot of those countries. So it's far more common for people to get together, and just like a bunch of people in the US would get together and go out to a club or go out to a bar or go to shoot pool or something like that. they'll get together to play video games. Not to say that they do it more, but it's something more commonly done among elderly people there. Not elderly, but like more older and mature crowds there than say out here. In the United States, most people don't necessarily go to LAN centers because they're not as plentiful, and there's people who do it, but it's not nearly as frequent. So I'm not surprised by there being like way more survivors in Japan. That's what I've always seen when I've been playing games, to be completely honest. Which makes me wonder though, if there's so many more people playing Survivor in Japan, why always get Japanese killers? Seems like they should have plenty of survivors over there, so why do they gotta come to the US and like face camp me, man? Get out of here. Next question. Will voice chat ever be a thing? Voice chat was actually tested very early on. We decided against it as it would ruin the atmosphere of the game. We don't mind people who want to talk to their friends as they play, but we do not want to force it on people who don't want it. I personally feel like this is a cop-out. I'm going to explain why. Before like anyone blows up, I'm going to explain why. At this point, they're very clear in understanding that Survivor Friends is a thing. There's a lot of people who engage in Survivor Friends. That being said, it's kind of already known that like if you want to talk, you can use Discord. And like even other games, say like League of Legends or Overwatch, have implemented voice chat. It seems like their argument is they don't want people to feel like they have to force it, but then by that same argument, you could just go the League of Legends or Overwatch route where you can have your default setting to be muted to where you just don't engage in voice. I feel like if they have it in game, they might feel like people might feel a bit more compelled to talk to their teammates in voice, but I don't know. It just seems like a cop-out to like not have voice in the game means that they don't have to balance around voice and being in the game, even though they know that people are doing it. If they know people are doing it and voice is in the game, then they know they have to balance around it, which would make a lot of killers angry if they don't. So, I digress. It's one of those things where like realistically voice in the game would be like one of the easiest way to bridge the gap of Survivor Friends, because even if you weren't in Survivor Friends, you could still talk to the people you're playing with. Although I do think toxicity might be an issue, they don't really seem to care about a lot of the other toxicity issues, so this seems more like a cop-out than we just don't want to force people to have to use it, but that's just my opinion. Next question. Speaking of Survivor Friends and balance, will the game ever be balanced for Survivor Friends? This can be a little tricky. If we buff killers to be more powerful and competitive against coordinated teams, solo players and more casual teams will struggle. We have been keeping Survivor Friends in mind as we design new content to make sure solo players aren't left behind, and we like to revisit existing mechanics as well to make them more accessible to solo players. By bringing solo players to the same level, we would be able to better balance around coordinated teams without leaving solo players behind. Basically what they're trying to say is, which is pretty much what we've all said and what I even said earlier, is it's impossible to balance around a coordinated team when all the teams aren't going to be coordinated. There's casual people who just like to play with their friends and fun, and there's casual people who just play this game by themselves, even if they're playing Survivor. It's one thing to balance around. That's one of the reasons why flashlights got nerfed into the ground. It was impossible to balance around flashlights when, you know, you could have a full squad who all have flashlights, who all know how to blind people and things like that, and how to get the killer saved. And they were so powerful to the point where even a solo player could go in with a flashlight and basically harass a killer by himself. Little to no, teamwork at this point. With the current setup of flashlights, unless you're playing with a group of friends or a specific build around it, it's really hard to work together or be able to get a flashlight save safely. I think personally it's probably a lot easier because you communicate other information about whether or not the killer's looking around, or you could tell the person to not crawl towards a wall, or important things like that to help them get an angle on a flashlight. But without having like a basically perfect angle, it's really hard to pull things like that off. And not just flashlights, pallet saves, insta heals, and so much more. Ultimately, I know a lot of killers and people in general want the game to be balanced around Survivor Friends, but as it stands, if it was balanced around Survivor Friends, solo queue would be unplayable. And as you heard from the developer stats a couple weeks ago, that over 50% of the survivors who play this game play solo. So they would lose over 50% of the Survivor player base if they balance the game solely around Survivor Friends, which isn't something I'm sure they're willing to do. Ooh, this is another good one in my opinion. What is your plan to deal with toxic players? For example, camping as a killer or bullying killers as survivors. Will you ever plan to change the game or stop this? We currently have a team of associate community managers reviewing reports and support tickets to deal with cheaters and abusive players. Camping is a bit of a tricky situation, so there are times where it could be the right move. For example, the gates are open, you have a survivor on the hook nearby. If you were to leave the hook, they would be able to escape easily before you could respond. But since it's a gray area, we don't want to punish for things like camping. We would not want to end up with the situation where rules are unclear and you're risking a ban just by playing the best you can. We're currently working on some new tools behind the scenes just to help our team deal with reports better. This was unfortunately, one of the biggest non-answers, but it's also not his fault because the person asking the question gave him the easiest non-answer excuse. My main problem with this is people complaining about killers camping. Camping killers are something that killers are going to do. There's some players who just don't know better, there's some players who don't know better strategy, and to be fair, there are some cases, as the developer described, where it is the best option for the killer. All of those things are going to be true. Complaining or reporting a killer for camping is silly. You can be irritated by it, you can be mad at him for it, but reporting him for it, it's sometimes just the best strategy for him. That being said, having a killer that is, say, specifically targeting a particular player, tunneling that player, stream sniping that player, sniping that player's lobby even without stream sniping, just to harass or grief that player, those types of things do currently go on quite often, and honestly, these devs need to do a much better job of handling it. I've had multiple times where I've had to either D-rank or just play on a different platform due to the simple fact that I've had multiple players, even other streamers at times, or even I believe at one point I even had a fog whisper at one point, stream sniping me, trying to more spam me, stream snipe me and trying to bleed me out, stream snipe me and try to lock me in a bot a basement or something like that, and all sorts of just completely idiotic things that should not be allowed. And I understand why the developers are quote-unquote very quiet and they don't release their information about their bans, but I feel a public execution once in a blue moon goes a far way to deterring people from doing it. In my opinion, a prime example of this would be when Angry Pug got banned for technically working with the killer to kill a survivor. He farmed a survivor right in front of the killer, knowing the killer was gonna hook him, and the killer downed him again, he teabagged him, and some other stuff went down. But basically, what Angry Pug did, he knew he deserved his ban, and he wasn't surprised when he caught his ban for it. But that goes back to my main point of, after he did that, the number of players who were doing those types of things to grief players went down astronomically for the following months. Someone who dealt with that type of griefing regularly in games, especially in solo queue, I can tell you for a good 2 months straight, I didn't have to deal with it nearly as much because people were extremely concerned about being bad or being banned for griefing. Having it be known that doing something like that is inappropriate, but more importantly, letting it be clear, showing that people are actively being banned for doing it, will go a far way from preventing people from doing this. I even think this is one of the big things I would say with League of Legends. This is probably one of the best updates League of Legends has ever added. If you report someone currently in League of Legends, when the developers, if they decide to take action, they will let you know that they reviewed your thing and that action was taken against the person. They won't tell you who it was, so you don't know exactly who it was. They won't tell you what action was taken, but they will let you know that because you reported someone, they found someone who was doing something inappropriate and an action was taken against that person. The simple act of letting someone know that they didn't waste their time with that report, one, will make them more likely to report, but two, will also make them more likely to not falsely report. If someone knows that the reports are being taken seriously and are giving positive feedback for reporting people properly, they're less likely to abuse it because they know that reports are actually being read. This is extremely important in my opinion if you want to clean up your community, but also if you want to positively enforce or positively promote people reporting bad actors. One of the biggest memes in Dead by Daylight right now is every streamer and their mother just does meme reports or funny joke reports because they realize, or at least they feel in their opinion, that the reports don't matter and the devs don't do anything about it. And that's because that's how the feels. That's how a bunch of streamers feel safe doing things that are completely toxic or inappropriate, because the one thing they say is they know the devs don't do anything. And if the devs don't do anything, even if they do, if the community doesn't feel like they don't do anything, then no one's going to stop the bad actions. The ultimate goal of a report and a report system isn't to remove bad actors, but to prevent bad action from being taken. The point of it is people know that they will be reported, so your goal is to help them reform and to, convince them to not do it. And the current way that devs are going about this does not properly, achieve this goal, in my opinion at least. But again, that's just my opinion on the situation. All right, guys, we've got 2 more of these and then we're out of here. Next up, when does the archive come out? As they said, the answer, the archives are currently planned for the next mid-chapter patch, so after the next chapter release. We'll keep you posted as this changes. What that means is the next chapter should be due out in September. The next mid-chapter patch, to my understanding, by that logic, would be out by November. Either mid-October or November would be like the next mid-chapter patch. Or let's say, early November, mid-October would be the mid-chapter patch. That being said, it sounds like it'd be pretty soon, and in which case that'd be really cool. It'd be cool to have the archives out. Basically, the archives will be out before the holiday season, and hopefully, my guess would be along with the Christmas event or right before the Christmas event if they do anything for Christmas. But more importantly, it'll be out for holidays, so for a bunch of new players to check out, a bunch of old players to come back to when they have extra time off for the holidays and stuff like that, to really engage with the new content, which I feel like is somewhat a smart move on their part. All right, guys, last one. Will Miss Piggy rework when? Or will Miss Piggy be receiving a rework? And according to the developers, a rework would require completely removing her power and creating a new one. We do not plan on a full rework on the pig. We will, however, be taking a look at our add-ons at some point in the future. So generally, as we know, when the devs decide to do a rework, or a full rework, it would be something more along the lines of Freddy, and not along the lines of what they did with Doctor or Wraith. Doctor and Wraith weren't necessarily full reworks, but just essentially retunings of their powers, as for Freddy, as we know, was an entire rebuild of his kit. So essentially change what his entire kit did, how his power did, and almost essentially making like a new killer, but just with his old skin. So, but it does seem like they're taking some of these claims seriously, and when people do ask for this stuff, as we see with the Freddy rework, they're thinking about if they're going to do it and why they're going to do it, not just doing it just because, which I think is a good thing. As it stands right now, I can't think of any killer that I'd really like to see reworked, but I would like to see some retunes, very similar, as I said, akin to like what we got with Doctor or Wraith. I would like to see some retunes for like Nurse, Trapper. Essentially, in my opinion, I want every killer who's currently out to be brought up to the level of Hillbilly, which I feel like multiple killers are drastically below that, which I feel like is extremely inappropriate and makes them really unviable at high ranks. So I'd like them to be tuned up to about where Hillbilly is, and then once everybody's performing almost as well as Hillbilly, I'd like them all to be tuned down just a little bit, but like collectively. Then you could make some collective changes that would like nerf all of them. That would bring them all down just to like a more reasonable level, in my opinion, of course. I do think Nurse is still extremely overpowered, and I think Hillbilly is slightly overpowered. I'm not on that Spirit overpowered train yet though, guys, sorry. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for the Dev Reddit recap AMA thing, whatever that was. I guess Dev Reddit AMA recap. There we go. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys gained some good information out of it. And on the flip side, I hope, you guys gained or enjoyed my insight along with gaining that information. If you guys want to talk to me about, anything the developers talk about, whether it be this AMA, a dev stream, or anything else, if you want to talk to me about it live, I stream every day on Twitch. Link to that will be down below. We hang out, we play Dead by Daylight, we try builds, we goof off, I play with friends, I play with viewers, we do the whole 9 yards, so I'd love to have you come through and check it out. But either way, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, my name is ShinoDBD, you're gaming and I'm a ninja, and I'll catch you guys later, alright? Deuces.